might just start recording.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we should have started at the start, right?
Better late than never.
Yeah. So that imaginary thing we set at around 10 hertz, 13 is gone.
That's true.
But you're starting to see someone here around 20. These can, the highest peaks you're getting, the highest local peaks, they're all the those are the ones that are starting to look like real data points.
Yeah.
Real frequencies.
The things like this.
Yeah. And you'll have a lot of funny things going on too. So because it's a large structure, it you generally have a very complex vibration. So there's lots of different modes that can be excited and so on. The best thing to be doing with it is for us to be able to test it ourselves, which we can't do. Because what you would just do is you would bounce it up and down. You know, you just give it an impulse and it'll shake and it'll give us a direct measurement, which is easy to deal with. This stuff's a bit harder. But you can start thinking about things like these peaks. This one at around 24 is potentially one. So what you can do is, what I did there with just 3 averages, we can do it for shorter windows. So because your frequency, sample frequency is 200 hertz, if you do a window which is 400 hertz long, so 400 data points, 400, yeah, then that's going to give you enough samples to do proper FFT. And you won't lose any resolution. It'll take you down to about half a hertz resolution.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do like 1,000, window it to 1,000 data points long. So where I've got 6, you could double that length. Where I've got 3, you could do 3 data sets, 2,000 samples long. You could go up to 3 data. Yeah, you could do 6 data sets. Each one's 1,000 long. And you could even work around those, working around the average, the saturation zones too, and extend those data sets. And when you get, if you can get up to about 10 or 15 of those sets of data, you're probably going to start seeing a much clearer picture.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when looking at that data, what should be some key things to look out for?
Number one is the peaks. You want to see
in the distance.
Distinct peaks. The height of the peak, it really just sets it out as being a natural frequency. With this data, I think it's too much noise to get much more than that in the acquired signal that they've given you. And you should see, I would think you would see repeated peaks, which are just like harmonics in it. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that. What else can you do with it? And it might be a case of having what else can you get out of there with lower?
Well, like we said before, there's a case of just from the level of noise in the data, we can pretty reasonably safely say that the motors aren't really well isolated.
Yeah, that's a good one. And actually, that would show, if you zoom out on the FFT again, assuming they're running them at fairly high speed, what's happened is you still have a lot of peaks above, roughly 50 hertz really, or 60 hertz. So, and that's showing you that they're still there. They're very dominant. Yeah, before that was there was just a blue line of noise, right? Above 50 hertz. You've reduced the background noise in it, but you still have a lot of peaks there, and they're going to be from the motors running at different speeds potentially. If you have, what do they have, four or five motors running at slightly different speeds, so you get those different peaks. And you also have the structural, lack of structural isolation for it.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so if that's the FFT data and then just generalized MATLAB data, what can I be looking out for in terms of Simulink and importing raw data as an output data into a model? See, if you remember, I had a pretty rough Simulink model that I showed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
I'm thinking that might be a starting point for importing some data and then maneuvering around some of the aspects and some of the geometries to sort of find a sweet spot for the spring stiffness and damping ratios. But I'd be interested to know what you had to say.
How would you do? So,
but yeah, what would be the end goal? Is sort of it'd be a matter of working backwards almost. If you have this data and you have X variable being spring stiffness or damping, essentially.
Yeah.
What is it? What is it that I'm looking to achieve? I've got this data now. This is what we've got. This is the current value. But where do we want to go from here? Ideally, what's going to be most beneficial for HeliGaia moving forward?
Yeah. Then you'd want to look at. I think if this is your input for the drone motion.
Yeah.
Then your output, you're going to have spring and damper connected to your camera, and you're going to measure the vibration of the camera as a result of this input motion, right?
Yeah.
Then what you're looking for then is to cut down the transmitted vibration, I think. And you probably want to do it at a region. You want to aim for, say, because they have a lot more dominant high frequency noise, but vibration. Maybe you want to say, well, if you choose the spring and damper values to reduce those peaks. So you would put in that as your input, and then you would change K and C values so that you can just tail off this high frequency vibration.
Yeah, and that would be very good because that will not only clear up some of the data, but it will also demonstrate what to be looking out for in future design to optimize, well, to reduce some of the noise in the data essentially, and that'll also translate into real world use.
Yeah.
I think that'd be very good. The other thing is, when I'm talking about goals in this, like it's good to have this data and demonstrate what's actually happening within the system. But the other thing I want to get to, like, there's got to be a point and a purpose for doing all this, right? So I want to also be able to determine some of the static deflections of the spring and maybe even some of the rigid body. But looking at this data, I'm not sure how I'd be able to get to that and get to that endpoint. Would you be able to know of a way?
The static deflection is just based on the weight.
Some displacement. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. If I can create a Simulink model and simulate some of the weights and some of the rigid body system with this imported data, would I be able to output either like frequencies which we've already been talking about, but also static deflection, which I suppose I can probably just.
The static, that will come off the time history. You would see it. The difference between the displacement. I'm thinking if you just let it go. So you haven't really. You'd have to include some sort of. You'd have to include a gravity force.
Yeah.
Static deflections. It's really just what is it? Brings gravity to, I can't remember now, but you can just get it directly from. There's a relationship between the spring stiffness and gravity, and the mass. I can't think of it. But it's a direct calculation.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Oh,
and is it mg on k?
Yep. Yeah. You could try. I'm just thinking about this out loud. You could try and do something fancy, and have 2 different springs in there. Hang on, let me just draw it. I don't know, it's on a rough piece of paper. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's that. Yeah.
And what you have, K1 would be like a bushing, so a very stiff spring that will help reduce the high frequency vibration. So that stuff up around 80 and 100 hertz. And K2 would help for the lower vibration around that 20 hertz. So you're trying to cover 2 zones with one complex, and that's something you can't. If you were to do it just using the frequency analysis, what do you call it? Just using your matrices and mass calculations, it's harder to do. You might have to have a small mass in between the 2 of them in your model to simulate it. Just a very small mass in between the 2 springs for the simulation. But that's going to do if 1K stiff, that isolates it from the motor vibrate noise, which is that what you're seeing up at 80 hertz. And then the other one's softer, that absorbs the shock and the vibration, like a more traditional engine vehicle suspension would do. Right, and that's, and that becomes a very small, in terms of practical design, with their wire rope dampers, they would literally be inserting a soft plastic or something in between, like a polyethylene or something.
Okay.
As like a, a tiny design change for them. Yeah, patent that before you tell it to them. I seriously, the more I talk to drone people, the more I think it's little things like that which they haven't really gotten into the industry. Like I was saying it last week, right? There's all these engineering practices out there in automotive and aerospace like that. That these guys with drones and autonomous systems haven't gotten onto yet. They're all computer science and software engineers and everything. The practical engineering is where you can make a big mark.
All right.
I emailed you about that PhD stuff, right?
No.
No? Yeah. That's, I don't know. It's if you wanted to work with those guys, if they don't have any money because of what's going on in the film industry at the moment and COVID and anything, if you wanted to work with them, it'd be one way to do it.
Yeah.
Is to spend a few years on a basically an industry led PhD.
Yeah.
It's the government, pays your salary basically at a PhD rate, which is lower. It's
Like 30K a year or something.
Yeah, tax free. Plus, you would do things like teaching and so on. Plus, you ask them for a top up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm certainly interested. Doing this has been so much fun. I'm loving it.
Oh, there's there's a lot you can do in this. I think this drone stuff, there's so much underdone, under researched from the engineering perspective. That
Yeah, I feel like I'm only really scratching the surface.
Yeah. No, I can see this going a long way. You could get years of work out of this. You know?
Yeah, I think so too.
And these guys, these heli guy, it'll set them in front of all their competition.
Yeah. Yeah. They just built a new drone actually, which I actually spoke to them yesterday. They built a new drone because they're filming Mad Max.
Oh yeah.
Broken Hill. So they've built a new drone for that, an FPV drone, which they really want some work done on it. They really need because it's an FPV drone, which is sort of a different technology in itself. So FPV drones are typically very small, but this one that they've built is huge. So the stability on that is absolutely crucial, and I think they need. Well, I don't want to say they're struggling with it, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement on their end.
Yeah.
But and they really, yeah. So that's off topic. That's between you and I. I'm not sure if it's public information or not that they got that. But moving forward though with the actual, I don't want to take up too much of your time, Paul. This is hit an hour now. If you want to go, that's fine.
All right.
I am very conscious about taking up because I know your time is very valuable these days.
You're all right. We'll keep going till we're finished off.
Yeah, so I just want to loop back around into where to go from here with it. And so we've averaged out the data. My next steps are going to be furthering this a bit more and taking more sample sets to average them out and maybe get a more nuanced look at some of the natural frequencies within the system. So that's going to be step one. Step two of this is in between that, I'm not going to look at any low pass or high pass filters. I'm just going to exclusively be looking at just vibrations. Just what I've got with the FFT. Sorry. And then another thing I want to be moving towards is Simulink and importing some of these signal datas and playing around with different models and different systems such as the double spring, the damper, and finding ideal values for K and C. And then hopefully from that, I'll be able to output with gravity as well, maybe a few more interesting, because I want to be able to give them, so a design graph essentially of, like we've spoken before about, excited frequency and what's the other one? Static deflection.
Yeah.
But whether that happens or not, I'm not super rigid on the idea.
Yeah. I would. Yeah. So what I would do is I would go through, do some more data sets on the FFT. And then when you start looking at the Simulink, start out with just a rigid I'm just thinking if you start out like that if you've got that single degree of freedom system you have, right?
Yep.
I would start there, and then you could look at how you can change K and C and get how the frequency response changes. It's hard without a good. I was hoping we'd get a more clear peak to signal where the first natural frequency would be, because that would have been that means you can very easily just change the K values around to get to that peak.
Yep, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been ideal for you. Yeah, and then so first thing might have been something like that. So pick, I guess, do a best guess off when you've finished the FFTs. You know, the lowest first decent peak, assume that's the natural frequency. Yeah. And then you can design, you got the mass, you can design a K around that value. And then you can look at tuning C and K from there to reduce some of the impact of changing K, not KC, on the response plot. And then you might add in, then you can probably split it off into two different directions, add in the base motion, right? So go from a grounded system, add in the motion of the base. And then you can plot what happens. Then you can see when you input their data, what happens to K and C in terms of the vibration of the motor, the camera. That gives you something for them to look at. That gives you something to look at in terms of what the impact of that vibration, because there's a lot of high frequency stuff in there, how much of that is transmitted down to the camera.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the bigger, that will be a bigger issue.
Yeah.
And then by changing K and C directly, can you reduce what's being the high frequency stuff which is transmitted down? And then do you need to go to that having two separate Ks? What I just showed then.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So that'd be the steps there. I'd look at finishing off the FFT, playing with tuning, getting the model working in a way you're happy with. And because you don't have a lot in there, because there's a single degree of freedom, you might just initially just do like a step input, like an input force, so it moves. On that, you can also do that, and you can get that displacement, the gravity, static deflection as well. Yeah, so basic movement, and then go up from there, just making making the model more and more complicated.
Yep. I think that's a good idea. All right, that's a great starting point. Hopefully, I'll have most of this finished by Friday's meeting.
All right, cool.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time, Paul. Greatly appreciate it.
No
Send
problem.
me through that PhD email that you were talking about.
Okay. Yep, I'll have to search for it.
All good.
Get you soon. Right. Thanks, Ben. See you later.
Yep.